stand on the porch and take deep breaths of fresh air. When his senses were dialed in, a bag he would pack and off he would go. As he wandered through the old timber woods, the boy was struck by a thought. He had a place of origin. That place was his treehouse. It seemed it had always been there. He didn't know anything else, but he felt the calling to leave. It was time. Time to leave the nest, as it were. What did this mean for him? He didn't know. So he sat down by the water and wrote his thoughts. As the fog of mind begins to clear, an image of the soul starts to appear. A blurred vision of self is what's held dear. Ideas of persona, I earnestly declare, a false guide to what is supremely real. Awaken my spirit beyond this realm, to travel far from home, a place taken by what is unknown. The further he wandered, the feeling of excitement began to grow. The possibilities of what life could be filled his mind. Once his ambition had subsided and his thoughts turned to the landscape around him, he realized how much life surrounded him. Every rock and every tree told a story. The material substrate he found himself was calling out, communicating the truth of their environment. He could see it in the water, the plants, and the sunlight. The earth was embedded with all the information of the cosmos right before his eyes. He was witnessing an integrated system of intelligence. It all spoke to him. What would he choose to listen to? Where would his focus take him? And what would he say in response? When he found a good flat spot in the mountains, he began building a shelter. Home was a place he could subsist, he thought. He knew how to do that anywhere, though. So, this raised the question. If home is a place that provides a means of subsistence, and he could acquire those means wherever he went, then was home something that could be anywhere, or was it something else? Maybe something internal, like the ability to acquire those means. Or was it something else entirely? It was a primitive question, but he felt it needed to be understood. What was his place, and what did it look like? Home was what he was calling it, but the idea seemed like home was a symbol. What was he truly searching for? He pondered this question, and it became more elusive the more he tried to grab hold of it. The thought was more like the presence of a feeling, an intuitive instinct, which was tugging on his heart. It was a feeling that oriented a direction to look, but when it came to visualizing it in his mind, it continued to evade his focus. Just like a piece of dust on his eye. He could see its outline in his peripheral vision, but every time he attempted to direct his eyes at it, it would glide further away. When he stopped trying to look at it, it would gently drift back closer into his field of view. He began to presume that whatever this thing was that was floating around his mind was embedded in the concept of home and subsistence, but his understanding was symbolized as an object in a location. He didn't have the language to articulate a description or the logic to set a parameter around it. For now, he sat by the fire under the stars and let his eyes follow the flames until his mind cleared and his senses tuned into each instant played out between the flame, air, and log. Miraculously, as if the presence of this feeling materialized, he received a framework for what he was trying to understand. Why he felt the need to venture out in search of something he thought he already had. It was something like the nature of his existence was a gift of life given to him. His form was a bounded state of the universal truth. By venturing out, he would encounter aspects of this truth that would illuminate internal systems, giving rise to a resonance of his being. This resonance would activate a signaling to other life, which would, in essence, create a harmony of acknowledgement to the universal truth, a true and beautiful reflection of the good that is creation. In this way, he could actively be at home, to participate in the presence of life. He slept deeply that night. The next morning, he packed up camp and moved forward. He recalled the epiphany from the night before. The thing that kept recurring to him was the impact of the experience. He felt it happened because he had taken the time to sit and be still. That stillness allowed him to become aware. That awareness revealed what was in front of him. Just as tuning into the fire revealed the activity at play, his mind's eye saw the activity at play in front of his heart. As he got further from his origin and things began to feel unfamiliar, he continued to think, which brought in a barrage of thoughts. They carried a greater presence, and he couldn't brush them aside. He had to do something with them. He decided, in order to make sense of them, they needed to be organized and connected. But how would he do it? They seemed disjointed and random. He needed coherence in order to establish a focused vision. He started by concentrating on one thought at a time, holding his attention and being present in how it made him feel. He wouldn't let himself trail off or become distracted. By doing this, he noticed the physical and emotional response his thoughts had on his body. His mind was affecting him physically. He would continue to hold each thought until he felt its energy and weight dissipate, until there was nothing left to focus on. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Recognition. After the boy had the epiphany of the mind-body connection, he began building mental structures, models of coherence. He started from the ground up. The first paired category was thought and experience. Thought was a type of processing, and experience was memory of sensory input. The two were separate but connected. The thought controlled the perspective of the experience and could generate additional information and feelings. Therefore, thought could alter experience based on the way it was perceived, and that could change with more experience over time. However, the thoughts about experience created feelings which directly affected the way he would carry himself forward through the material substrate that provided the experience. Depending on how he felt about something, that would control the way he experienced it. This would create feedback loops if he didn't allow himself to think differently about his experiences as he acquired more. If he viewed experience as a static object and didn't understand how to navigate through that space with his thoughts, then he would continue to encounter the same experience. One evening, he came to the edge of the woods and saw a large clearing where grand buildings stood. These were institutions, the physical manifestation of mental structures, an amalgamation of thought and experience whose validity was established by consensus. He felt that institutions of knowledge offered a pre-made perspective. They had legacies behind them and their own evolutionary lifespans. This intrigued him. What made them important? And did they truly have an authority over what they claimed to represent? After all, it seemed the big buildings were like big houses, and all the people in it seemed to treat it like it was their home. Did they find what they were looking for in there? Or did that place tell them they didn't need to look any further? Was the institution a static object? Living with the natural world provided immutable truths that grounded the boy. He might not understand it all, but making discoveries along the way inspired him to keep moving forward. Each thing scared him. He thought about going inside to see what it was like, so he popped his head in the door. It appeared impressive, but there was something dissonant. Maybe one day he would go further in, but for now there was no reason, so he moved on. The further he got away from his origin, and time began to make its mark, he started to lose his identity. He had no idea so much of who he perceived himself to be was bound to his surroundings. The more things became unfamiliar, the more he questioned who he was. He thought about his treehouse, his routine of stepping out on the porch in the morning, organizing his things and keeping the fire going. Having constants like that gave him stability and an identity based on a pattern of experience. After a while, though, the routine became monotonous and mundane, a stifling form of claustrophobia for the spirit. The consistency of experience is what became the association to identity. This familiarity gave him a sense of security because it was predictable. Leaving that space and that routine stripped him of familiarity and therefore made him insecure. He wondered who he really was, if not the maintainer of specific things in a specific place. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Reconciliation. As the boy moved through the wilderness, he heard a creek flowing over the hill. There were poles stuck in the ground along great clearings that stretched across the land. These tendrils stemmed from the institutions he found at the edge of the woods. Wires were strung from one pole to the next and carried on as far as the eye could see. These wires transmitted electrical power and information from the institutions to other places. It reminded him of the nervous system. The various institutions were like the different parts of the mind and body, with wires like nerves and roads like arteries connecting to different parts of a large creature. He thought of people like specialized cells aggregating in specific locations to do specific things. People and their activity collectively making up one complex system, or in other words, humanity. The body of mankind. But a synthetic being nonetheless, that seemed to simultaneously allow people to expand at scale in their specific environments, but at the same time constricting their spiritual growth. It was an odd paradigm, one in which exemplified the inner and outer state of being, as an individual and as a whole. He didn't know how his journey fit into this vision of the world. There seemed to be a reflection of his own internal workings at scale. He didn't understand why it was this way, or what the purpose of this larger being was. He was on a journey to seek out understanding, to find his way. But the more he thought about things, the more complicated it got. What was humanity doing? Why were they doing it? Was humanity seeking to understand? Was humanity looking to find its way? It didn't make sense because it seemed disconnected from nature. Why were they separating themselves? Was the boy separating himself? The boy wondered for a while whether or not his curiosity would lead him astray. He thought about his treehouse. Maybe he shouldn't have left. He was overwhelmed and his doubt was relentless. He couldn't let it paralyze him. He had to push forward. He figured he could start as an observer and use the discoveries he made about himself as a guide. Maybe his personal experience would give him clues that would help make sense of what he was finding. That was a good place to start, or so he thought. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Exploration. As the boy walked, he followed the sound of the creek. He hiked over the hill that was between him and the sound. Once he reached the top of the hill, he saw a beautiful flowing creek that ran down into the valley. Near the turn of the creek, on the embankment at the base of the hill, was a strange building. The building had a big front porch on it, gardens out in front. He saw a man sitting in a rocking chair. As he got closer, the man shouted, "What can I do for you?" The The boy paused. He responded, "I'm just following the sound of the creek." The man got up from his chair and came down off the porch. He held the straps of his suspenders and stood with a wide stance, his chest puffed up. "You hungry?" he said with a direct tone of voice. "Doing all that walking? Let me give you something. Come up to the house." The boy followed the directives of the man as if there was no other option. He got up on the porch. He stood patiently while the man was inside. The man came back out with a bag of beef jerky, coffee, and bread. He handed it to the boy and said, "Take this." The boy looked at the provisions and smiled. "Wow, thank you. This is great." The man nodded. "Where are you going?" The boy responded with a bit of a nervous chuckle, like he had been caught doing something wrong. "I'm not sure. I'm just kind of walking around trying to figure things out." The man's eye got bright. "Ha, good luck. I've been trying to figure things out my whole life. It never stops. There's always something to figure out. I tell you what, I started out similar to you, but eventually you get tired of walking around. That's a young man's game. Find you a spot, dig in, and let the storms come and go." The boy didn't exactly understand what the man was trying to tell him, and felt slightly insulted about walking around being a young man's game. He felt that the man didn't understand the depth of the journey he was on. But he wasn't going to hold on to those feelings. He brushed it off and asked the man, "What was it that made you decide to dig in?" The man got a serious look on his face and leaned in. "When I kept finding the same thing no matter where I went. I figured if it's the same everywhere, there's no point in going anywhere." Then he leaned back and erupted into a fit of short but powerful laughter. "It took me a while to find that out, though, so I'm not discouraging you from your journey. I'm just telling you mine. Maybe it'll be different for you. I don't know." The boy felt a strange sensation of peace and warmth after the man said this, but he also felt deep down there was something very true about what he said. "What do you do now?" the boy asked. "Well, I'm still trying to figure things out. That's how I have my fun. But I have found, at least for me, that the more I observe the things around me, the more I notice it in myself and vice versa. You can never step in the same creek twice, if you know what I mean." The boy didn't really know what he meant. It seemed vague, but once again true. He could tell that the man was referring to very specific things, but it was too big to get into. It was a knowledge that he had acquired through many experiences over a long period of time. The man looked at him and said, "Well, this is about all the human interaction I can handle for the day." He laughed and then smacked the boy on the shoulder and said, "You'll be fine," and turned around and went inside. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. Transcendence. The sun was beginning to go down, and the boy needed to find a place to set up camp. He found a sturdy tree with good roots and set up a fire underneath it. He rolled out his mat and looked around. As he looked up at the night sky through the branches and listened to the creek, he found himself in a deep dream state. He could see clearly even though it was dark. He walked over to the creek and saw the stars reflecting on the water. When he looked at the stars, he saw the reflections from the light off of the water, and it all connected to his eyes. The beams of light that were being transmitted hung like wires in the sky, similar to the wires that transferred power and information from the institutions and buildings. Those beams of light, he realized, physically connected him to those far-off places through the photonic particles. transferring information to him. He didn't know how to decode it, but it was being downloaded. His eyes reflected the light of the stars back onto the water, and in the water he saw a projection of his body as an energetic light. He could see a holographic structure of his anatomy, and glowing around his form was a radiating electromagnetic field that emanated from his heart. It was through this field that he could see that his energy was present in a multitude of dimensions. How he moved through this physical substrate was not an isolated instance in a material plane. His electromagnetic emanation was connected to a multi-dimensional system that existed outside the perceptual bandwidth of his five senses. It was at this point he realized he wasn't in his physical body. He wasn't wet from the creek. This caused him a brief moment of fear, which immediately sent him back into his body. He opened his eyes. He was still underneath the tree. The fire was only embers now, and he could feel the ground beneath him. After an experience like that, he wondered what he was supposed to do.